Kadarius Toney, a must-add wide receiver. Week 6 coming up, and we're looking to strengthen our team. And boy, did the fantasy gods rain down a little bit of luck on us. Kadarius fucking Toney, come on down. 19% rostered in ESPN leagues. Toney is officially in the NFL, breaking Odell Beckham Jr.'s franchise rookie record of 185 receiving yards in a single game with 189 yards receiving on 10 receptions. He added a rush of 7 yards to the resume and came out looking fucking awesome, despite the fact that 1, Daniel Jones went out with a concussion, 2, he had to deal with Mike Glennon at quarterback, and 3, he left before the game was even over because the motherfucker threw a punch. Despite all that, he's not expected to be suspended. Everything's supposed to be dealt with in-house. He's saying all the right things. You know, people looking up to him, got to show a better example, got to be a better leader, blah, blah, blah. Fact is, dude, fantasy-wise, looks like a player that at the position might be the best ad of the year, and you want to get in there and get on him if you need a wide receiver. Obviously, PPR, he's going to be a monster, and even in standard, we saw that high ceiling despite the fact that he is a large target guy. 189 yards, you're going to take that any day of the week in standard. This is a must-add in any format, especially PPR. He's the type of guy that in PPR can be a league winner if things fall right. I know we have Sterling Shepard coming back, Darius Slayton. Not worried about Slayton so much. He's always just kind of been a guy that's been there for either a big game or not. He's a hit or miss. He's not the biggest part of the offense. He's basically been John Ross the last couple games. So, I mean, we probably see John Ross kind of take a back seat when Slayton comes back, unless they like Ross over Slayton. But I don't think that affects Toney. The one that might affect Toney a little bit is the high volume target in Sterling Shepard. Hope is that Toney actually affects Shepard more than Shepard affects Toney. And then you take into account that Kenny Golladay, once again, dealing with another injury. This guy's dealt with quad injuries, like groin injuries, hip injuries. Now this one's a knee injury. Definitely not a guy that you can rely on for the New York Giants. And Toney looks like flat out the best offensive weapon right now. Maybe Barkley gives him a run for his money, but right now Barkley out with another injury, and that we'll talk about in my other running back video. But the fact is, Kadarius Toney is the prize wide receiver this week and possibly of the entire season coming off the waiver wire. Can't stress that enough. This is a must add. Up next, another must-add. If you can find him, he's out there in about 24% of ESPN leagues. That's Jerry Jeudy. Plenty of teams, I'm sure, had to drop him. These are probably teams that didn't have IR spots. They had to make room for somebody else. They were in panic mode. If you're a 3-1 team, or a 4-1 team, a 5-0 team, and you have the roster spot, Jerry Jeudy's the type of guy you can pick up, stash. You know, he could return as soon as week 7. I would assume more week 8 or week 9. I'm pretty sure they're going to be very careful bringing Jeudy back. Remember, his money is made on his juking moves, his ability to get the cornerbacks to fall on the ground, kind of like Hollywood did last night on his long touchdown. And that requires your ankles to be right. So I would expect more of a week 8, week 9. So if you can get Jerry Jeudy, he's in your league and he's available, and you can stick him on your roster knowing he's not going to play for a couple weeks. That's another type of guy that can be a league winner. He's just not readily available the way Kadarius Toney is in 81% of ESPN leagues. So obviously you're taking a look, you're looking for Jerry Jeudy. That Broncos offense is desperately dying for him to come back. Courtland Sutton's been a little bit up and down. Obviously Teddy Bridgewater a little up and down as well. And his safety net was Teddy Bridgewater was Jerry Jeudy. And Jeudy is always open. He runs a lot of routes that Teddy likes to throw to. He's going to be a PPR monster. And even in standard, I would pick that guy up if I had a good record at this point and I could manage a roster spot, because Jerry Jeudy, like I said, is a guy that can win you a league. Some guys that you can roster, but they're not necessarily immediate starts. They're not must-adds. These are prospects for people that have an extra roster spot. Maybe somebody just went on IR. It was a busy week for injuries, and you want to add a prospect on there to see how he maturates over the next couple weeks. We'll start with Marquez Calloway. There was a lot of hype on this guy, obviously, coming out of the training camp, and he had some big moments in preseason, and he's had some fluky but big moments as of late for the Saints. He's coming off a 8-target game. It by far is his most involvement in the passing game. He got 85 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of them coming off of a Hail Mary. So he's got 1 touchdown so far this season off of a Hail Mary, and then another one that was basically a Hail Mary from the 10-yard line as Jameis Winston was being taken down to the ground, and he just hucked it up for Callaway. So, currently 2 of his 3 touchdowns really kind of fluky, little worrisome, but he definitely, he has good hands. He's fast. They still have a need for wide receiver until Michael Thomas comes back, but that countdown is sooner than later, but we don't know, what type of, if he's going to be in game shape. Is this guy in a copacetic situation where he even wants to come and play for the New Orleans Saints? Because remember, these guys were at odds in training camp. So Marquez Calloway is an interesting prospect that everybody gave up on really quickly, including me. I had I had needs other than Calloway, so he was a guy that I dropped. But part of me wishes I could have kept on to see how he maturates a little bit more. This is his first opportunity as a wide receiver 1, and they finally gave him a real opportunity to be the one, and he came up in a big way on Sunday for anybody that was willing to throw him in a DFS lineup or that was desperate enough to throw up in a lineup. But 42% rostered. There's a guy that's out there that you can add that has upside with Jameis Winston, who right now is basically leading the league in touchdowns per pass. So Jameis Winston, once again, finding ways to get touchdowns, even though he's in a low-volume passing attack at the moment. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Detroit Lions, 5.4% rostered. He has 8 targets in the last 2 weeks, so 16 targets in 2 weeks, 13 receptions on those targets, so he is catching them. There's one thing when you get targets, it's another thing when you're actually catching those targets. And right now, Amon-Ra St. Brown being pretty efficient with those targets. He has 135 yards, 70 in 1 week, 65 in the other. So this to me, I know PPR, that sounds really nice, but even a 6 or 7 point floor with bye weeks coming up, even in standard, that sounds okay to me. And when you think about the fact that Quentin Cephas went down with a collarbone injury, Hawk is getting the star treatment. He's getting double teams. somebody outside of DeAndre Swift and Williams has to be involved in this passing game. And right now it looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown has a great opportunity as a rookie to establish himself as a key cog in this passing attack. Not prolific, but with bye weeks coming up, with injuries in the league, depth is more paramount than anything. And right now, Amon-Ra St. Brown gives you a little bit of depth at the wide receiver position. If you want something with a somewhat, from what it looks like the last 2 weeks, steady, stable floor in PPR, and gives you somewhat of a floor in standard, because, when you're looking at 65, 70, and 70 yards in back-to-back games, that gives you a little bit of hope in standard that he can come through, maybe get in the end zone, maybe turn that into a 100-yard outing and bring that point total up. But he's not giving you like 3 points, So once again, somebody who looks a little bit stable that you can pick up right now in about 95% of ESPN leagues. Next guy is Van Jefferson. I'm going to talk about him again. He's coming off a bad game on Thursday night. I understand. I think this is for multiple reasons. Once again, we're talking about Van Jefferson as a guy that we are adding as a guy to see how he does, or what I consider a desperate bye week fill-in, or a desperate boom bust play. And Van Jefferson is shown to be a guy that he can boom and he can bust. He's boomed twice this season. He's busted 3 times. So obviously we're looking at about a 40% boom percentage at this point. Not quite at the 50-50 mark, but that gives you an opportunity in a desperate situation, in a dire situation, to go to a guy who right now is only 16.4% rostered in ESPN leagues, to go out there and get a guy who is a piece of one of the more prolific offenses in the league. His role has been growing every week. It definitely looked like they were trying to get him involved early on Thursday night. It didn't work out. I think there's multiple reasons for that. One of them, obviously, he had his first drop of the season. Should have been a touchdown. Then he would have looked pretty good for 2 weeks in a row. And I think there would have been a lot of interest in Van Jefferson if he would have got that touchdown. And then Stafford being a little bit off the mark. But on his second target on the game, he showcased what he can do in that offense in terms of his route running. He does have the ability to become an elite route runner in the NFL, and that is a guy in this offense that, especially in keeper and dynasty leagues, I'm very interested in. We don't know if Robert Woods is going to be coming back in 2022, and if Robert Woods isn't back in 2022, think about what Van Jefferson's role is going to be in this offense in his third season. So I think his role, as it has been, will grow throughout the season. By the end of the season, this could be a guy that you're totally thinking about using as a flex from week in, week out, depending on what your roster configuration is, depending on what his matchup is. But you feel comfortable with the idea that, man, this guy has the ability to go out there and get me points, where every week I go out there and I see the desperate plays, and Van Jefferson is a much better desperate play than most, considering the offense, the route running ability, the quarterback, all of it. And I think his role, like I said, is just going to grow. Robert Woods, that's interesting what he did. It was actually amazing what he did on Thursday night. I don't know if it is something that's sustainable. Maybe he starts leveling out around 8 to 10 targets a game, but what he did on Thursday night was definitely a squeaky wheel, feed me, Sean McVay just doing the right thing as a coach and making his players happy type situation. So I'll probably go back to Woods not being such a target hog moving forward, but he was definitely needed, especially the type of routes that he runs and how off Stafford was on Thursday night. Some watch list guys. These guys I need to watch a little bit more, or in the next case, a lot more before I start adding them to my roster. One of them, I'm sure people are going to be wondering about this guy, Chris Moore from the Houston Texans. He's in his 6th year. He is literally 0% rostered. Chris Moore was a call-up from the practice squad on Sunday after it just came to find out they were so thin at the wide receiver position. They needed somebody. It was thought that he was going to get the call-up all week. He got some extra reps in with Mills during the week, from what I understand. And we all knew that New England was going to try to take Brandon Cooks away. He was a bad start for me last week. He was a bad start indeed. And we were able to get a good game out of Moore. Now, this to me is a fluke. You know, we're talking about a guy that got a call up from the practice squad. He's going back down. Danny Amendola probably expected back week 6. You know, that is going to be a big factor in whether Chris Moore can succeed with Danny Amendola coming back. And then we have to remember that they maneuvered to get Nico Collins in the draft out of Michigan in the 3rd round. His big 6'4" frame with good speed will be coming back at some point, dealing with the shoulder injury. I think they were kind of expecting him to come back by now, but the shoulder injury, I think, is lingering a little longer than they were anticipating. But the fact is, at some point, Nico Collins will come back. Assuming Danny Amendola can stay healthy, he'll be there. And, you know, Brandon Cooks. And there's no room for Chris Moore. So I think he's a waste of an ad this week. I think he's a guy, if you want to press the watch list button and keep your eye on him, see what he does next week, maybe the week after that. And if he can continue getting routes, if he even gets brought up off of the practice squad, then you can think about adding him. But right now is extremely way too premature, not even beat the waiver wire. This guy right now was, to me, he just had the best game of his career, and he'll probably get called back up, but his role is going to be so much smaller because Amendola is going to be there. So if he can do this again, definitely eyebrows will be peaked a little bit, and we'll be rediscussing this situation next week, but that is only if he can have any sort of encore to what he did on Sunday. Another guy to keep your eye on is James Washington, 1.3% roster in ESPN leagues. Obviously, Juju out for the season. That's going to raise the value of Deontay Johnson. It's definitely going to raise the value of Chase Claypool. And it definitely brings James Washington into a conversation, but I think the conversation is right now with the way that Ben Roethlisberger is at his age, he is not going to sustain more than 2 wide receivers. That's been the frustrating thing with Chase Claypool, right? We all expected in the offseason Juju to leave so we could set Claypool free in his 2nd year. That didn't happen. And Claypool, you know, made some plays early on, but he needed Johnson gone there to get all those targets there in week 3, and he needed Juju gone last week to become a big part of this offense. And now that Juju's gone, that obviously means that Johnson and Claypool are going to do the heavy lifting. And then I think you even have like Fairmouth maybe coming into the equation. And I know Ben likes Washington, so he's going to get some targets. But if anything, I think what Washington's going to end up being is a DFS flyer, like the most desperate of plays in like deep 16 team leagues, but I don't think he ever really gets any sort of fantasy relevance with Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson in his way. And then it sounds like to boot that the Steelers will be looking to sign another wide receiver. So I just don't think that the role, the position for Washington to become any sort of fantasy relevant will materialize this season. And finally, this guy actually, he was a preseason like smoke, where there's smoke, there's fire type of guy. I very rarely see so much smoke on one player. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he came out and he's been a big part of this offense as far as snaps, but not a big part of this offense as far as the passing game. And finally, coming off a big game, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 70 yards. This offense has been looking for a wide receiver, especially with Jarvis Landry on IR, and we just continue to see Odell Beckham Jr. Struggle to get on the same page as Baker Mayfield. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a guy that there was legit talk coming out of training camp about this guy being a replacement for Odell or Jarvis with those contracts coming up on expiration. And so far this season, you have seen 0 from Peoples-Jones up until week 5 when he popped up. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 70 yards, a decent day in PPR with 12 points. You know, that's definitely flex worthy and something to keep your eye on in an offense that's desperate for pass catchers. Look at how they're using their tight ends right now. They are coming out in 3 tight end sets like crazy. They just don't have the wide receivers. Rashad Higgins is just not cutting it. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is the next guy up, the best guy behind Odell Beckham Jr. at the wide receiver position right now to come up and become fantasy relevant. He's not a guy I'm really interested in rostering yet, but I'm definitely adding him to my watch list and see if he can be one of those guys that can make a second half of the season breakout. There will be guys that are going to break out in the second half of the season. Maybe Peoples-Jones' breakout was just delayed by half of a season. Add him to your watch list. If you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. On Sunday, I will be joining Mike Lynch and Rashad Taylor on 1080 The Fan here in Portland, Oregon for the Fantasy Scramble. We will take start-sit questions from 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, so a half hour up to kickoff. We take your start-sit questions. We answer them live on the radio and give you that last-minute advice. You can text your questions in to 503-250-1080, and you can listen live on the Odyssey link that will be in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and make sure that you check out my running back ads for Week 6.